is actually no agreed definition of just transition. You know, it was the trade union movement that got it going along with the environmental NGOs, and it's basically about reconciling having environmental ambition but being fair to people, you know, in the workforce at the same time. So in Scotland, you know, with the Just Transition, the way we set it up, our principles were it's about making sure when we make that transition to net zero by 2045, we take advantage of that, and there are certainly benefits to be secured for lots of different people, but we also look out for the things that can go wrong and the risks to workers, communities, etc. from the change, because the economy surely will change. It's about making sure that's done in a fair kind of way. And one thing we did in Scotland, we actually took the concept much more broadly. In many countries, just transition is about getting out of coal. But since Llungannet closed in 2016, coal is in the rear-view mirror in Scotland. So it's moved much to broader issues about like what's going to happen to the oil and gas industry. But we took it even wider to say it's not only about the supply side, it's about the impacts on consumers and who pays for the transition as it comes through. Yeah, well, in terms of the Commission, we had a 2-year life, and we reported in March 2021, just before the elections for the new Scottish Parliament. And it was 12 people. They came from various constituencies. We had business, we had trade unions, we had environmental NGOs, community groups, and a scattering of academics in there as well. And the nice thing was that everybody was up for compromise and working together. So unbelievably, in spite of the diverse group, we produced a consensus report for the ministers, you know, in March this year. And we're pleased to say that the Scottish Government has said that it accepts all of the recommendations that we came up with. You know, we'll be looking at the detail in the future, but that was certainly the declaration. Yeah, well, there's 24 of them, so I'm not going to go through them all. But for communication, we put them into 4 different groups. So one is about the importance of planning for a just transition, because the lesson, you know, from Scotland's industrial history, say the way the coal mining industry ran down, is that an unplanned transition is an unjust transition. So one of the things that will be happening is that there will be a set of just transition plans for each sector, starting with energy, which I think the Scottish Government will be getting the process going by the end of this week, actually during the COP process. Second thing is about sorting out skills, because many of the skills that are used in the existing energy industry could be moved over into new energy, and it's about making sure that retraining opportunities are available for people and making sure that the skills that people have are easily transferred, so that a diver on a North Sea oil platform doesn't have to go through £1,500 worth of retraining to do a very similar job on an offshore wind platform, you know, for example. So the skills training certification is important. We emphasise the importance of getting closer to communities. We've placed a big emphasis on the role of local governments and community groups, and there's a variety of different recommendations around, for example, how local authority budgets are set. And then the final big one was about who pays for it. Most of the cost of decarbonisation so far has been paid for by electricity consumers, and that's like a flat tax on the population effectively. So we think there are other costs coming up, the role of heat pumps, greater use of electricity in homes, issues about digital connectivity for people in rural areas. All of these issues, we need to think really carefully about who pays. You know, can the Scottish National Investment Bank help? Can the public sector help? But how much are people who are able to pay going to actually contribute some of the costs? That's absolutely the case. So a lot of the standard, you know, offshore is a kind of skill, and a lot of the offshore skills can be reapplied to offshore renewables. But we're also very conscious, if you, for example, move carbon dioxide capture and storage, as we were reminded earlier today, then the geological skills that are there in the oil and gas industry come into play, because you need to characterise the reservoirs, you need to monitor the CO2 to make sure that it's actually staying down there. And then you go to the downstream bit of the new economy, you know, the potential for hydrogen production, and many of the downstream downstream skills in the oil and gas industry would be applicable there as well. So sure, there's a lot that can be moved over. Not everything, but a lot. Well, Scotland is certainly leading the way in producing recommendations for a just transition. We need to turn these into action now, and that's the job of the Just Transition Commission in its next phase, and also the new Minister, Richard Lochhead, because we now have a Minister for Just Transition in Scotland, which I think is the only example in the world. So just to say, I think actually Scotland is perceived to be taking quite a leading role at the moment. I've been invited to do lots of talks in different parts of Europe. I'm doing a talk at the EU Pavilion at COP later this week on just transition issues around what's happened in Scotland. I've done talks in the US via Zoom, of course. So there's a lot of interest in what Scotland is doing, because I think partly because we've broadened the concept of just transition, and there's a great deal of interest in how we're going about it. Yeah, okay, so I would expect, I mean, at the moment I am the only member of the Just Transition Commission Phase 2, but I think we will get the new commissioners will be named very shortly. But the Scottish Government has said they want this new Just Transition, and we've identified 3 major functions for it. One is to take a look at the sectoral just transition plans that the government will be producing, as well as an overall just transition framework that will sit above all of the sectoral plans. So we will be taking a look at these and judging, whether they're actually doing what it says on the tin. The second one is to monitor and evaluate progress. So we'll be looking to identify indicators of progress in terms of just transition that might apply to the labour market or costs falling on consumers. And then the final one is that we're being asked to do engagement with communities in different parts of the country in different sectors, which was very much the mark of Phase 1 as well, because in fact, I think only one of our meetings took place in a windowless room in Edinburgh or Glasgow. All of the others were out at specific places around Scotland, talking to farmers, talking to oil and gas workers, etc. So these are the 3 things, and there will be a published report every year saying how well we think the Scottish Government is doing. Yeah. I mean, I think technology is going to play a really important role in getting to net zero. And I think we can kind of break the technology into different kinds, because there's what you might call big kit, which are kind of things that the oil and gas industry, does well, in terms of carbon capture, hydrogen production, etc. That's one kind of stream. There's another kind of stream of technology which is for much more modular kind of technologies, and there I'm thinking of things like electrolyzers, for example. We've seen the cost of batteries and photovoltaic cells come down. It's the same sort of branch of science, the electrochemistry, that could lead you towards more cost-effective, more efficient electrolyzers. And given the role of potentially of green hydrogen, that's going to be, a very, very important potential technology. So there's all sorts of strands, and some of it is in the laboratory, and some of it is much closer to market and at the demonstration phase. So I think the balance of effort between the academic sector and business depends, and interaction and collaboration is absolutely important, but for some parts of it will be closer to the laboratory bench, other parts much more to demonstrating things out in real environments.